Most important meal of the day, serving up Gary's way. Oh,
So in like the least concerning way possible, I'm currently kind of going through it. I've been stuck in my apartment for about 48 hours now, because it's cold outside. My back has been hurting on and on for about a week. Don't know what all that's about. I want a turkey sandwich, but I don't have anything to make a turkey sandwich with in my apartment. I want to go touch grass. So yeah, I'm not doing too great, but things could be a lot worse. I could be stuck on the Tolparv, which is the ship featured in Mouthwashing, which is what I'm going to be talking about today. Mouthwashing was the last game that I played in 2024, and I quite liked it, and I had a lot of thoughts about it, but I didn't have the energy or time to make anything super formal. I'm saving that energy for my 2024 year in review video, which will be coming out after this. It will be coming out after this. But I still wanted to get my thoughts out about Mouthwashing and kind of use this to determine whether or not I wanted to rank it in my year in review 2024 video. So this is just kind of me yapping, as the kids say nowadays. And so we're going to talk about Mouthwashing. There's going to be a lot of spoilers, and there's also going to be a lot of content warnings, which I will feature on the screen right now. So yeah, we're just going to kind of chat, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about what I thought about Mouthwashing, kind of in the formatting that I did for my Ace Attorney Justice for All video. I'm going to try and do it underneath a time limit, not get too deep into it, but still kind of give you my general thoughts. And I invite anybody else to chime in the comments down below. So with that out of the way, I'm going to try and do this in under 20 minutes, hopefully under 15. Let's start the timer, and let's go. Mouthwashing is a short but compelling story about bodily autonomy and responsibility that is unfortunately held back by some awkward gameplay, but more than makes up for it in its presentation. Curly's a likable and clearly well-meaning ship captain, but also a deeply flawed man who ultimately fails in his duties when it comes to protecting his most vulnerable crewmates. And he's interesting because he's only really a character for half of the game, while the other half intentionally objectifies him and bars us from understanding who he is or what he's thinking. This bastard, he's a good monster of a human being. Swansea's your typical jerk with a hidden heart of gold character that is common in ensemble casts, but he's given extra depth in also being one of the more self-aware characters, and having a moment towards the climax of the story that's deeply sobering but cathartic. Daisuke is perfectly fine. Compared to the rest of the cast, he's arguably the most pure character, but he's also the flattest one. Anya's not given the same level of attention from Mouthwashing's other characters or the game itself, although it is regrettably very fitting given the story's themes. But what she does bring to the table is meaningful, and I felt that her portrayal as a victim of sexual abuse is empathetic and tactful. This is honestly the worst part about the game, but it's not terrible. Most of it is a walking simulator, which I actually don't mind, but there are a few action sequences that really killed the momentum for me, as they relied on fast reflexes and decent aim, neither of which I have, and both of them made more aggravating by the janky controls. There was a stealth section that I enjoyed though, even if I had to be told it was a stealth section by my friend, and the one valve puzzle was also pretty good. It came out of left field, but I liked it. The blocky, gritty geometric design of the game was perfect for me as a cube enthusiast. I'm not a fan of overly slick or realistic gameplay styles. I've always preferred heavily stylized or retro looks. Which is nice because this game is obviously set at some point in the future, since space travel is now an automated business. But the ship Tolparv is depicted as being very mechanical and out of date. It adds to the dour atmosphere where you're trapped in a ramshackle ship that has no privacy and maybe isn't good for sustaining human life. It strikes this nice balance of being distinctly uncomfortable and industrial, but also oddly cozy. And since it's such a small ship that you could pretty easily learn the layout of it in a few minutes, it lends itself well to being warped by the game's surreal elements that begin in the first two acts and then really ramp up by the end. No complaints about the surrealism here. It was one of my favorite elements from the devs' first game, How Fish is Made, and I love that they kept it, but also gave it a fresh coat of paint. I must also give a shout out to the soundtrack. Sick album cover, by the way. At times it's haunting, other times it's solemn, a couple of times it's really goofy and cheery, and then it'll just randomly hit you with Here are my top 5 tracks in no real order. Go listen to them. The story is pretty simple and straightforward, and moreover, I won't say that I was surprised by any of the events that transpired. This is not the fault of the game by any means. I just happen to be moderately genre savvy, and since I'm familiar with their previous work, I was prepared for the ending to be at least somewhat sad and bitter. But I liked the story, and this is an instance where the nonlinear framing device worked for me. It misleads the average player into thinking Curly crashed the ship, although once you look back it becomes clear you were playing as Jimmy. It also retroactively gives context for why Anya reacted to Jimmy the way that she did, and why she would have been so uncomfortable administering medicine to Curly. I don't think mouthwashing would have been as effective if it was told in order, but I also think the narrative itself is strong enough regardless. Okay, time to get serious. The only thing that I was spoiled on was the fact that sexual assault would be implied because my friend cautioned me about that. But what I didn't expect and was pleasantly surprised by was to see it as the main driving force of the plot, and that it was handled well. Mouthwashing never outright says the word rape, but it gives you enough details where you know Jimmy raped Anya. I don't know about you, but the second the word rape is said, it immediately sets me on edge. And for that to be what the game is about, but to never once hear that word said, it unnerves me in a way that I can't fully describe, just because they're not naming the elephant in the room that everyone sees. You could do whole video essays about each of these topics that I'm going to discuss, and plenty of people have, so I'm going to just do a quick flyby over my own reactions to each of the themes I took notice of in Mouthwashing. Overall though, my feelings are positive, so I don't want any of you clowns saying that I don't like dark or heavy material, because I do, I just like it when it's done well. In the past, I've been very critical of how games portray sexual assault because rape culture is universal and very prominent in video games. Mouthwashing handles this topic with the sensitivity needed and the nuance that is often ignored. Anya is raped by the co-pilot of the Tulpar, with no chance of escape from her abuser, and the most her boss does is promise to talk to her rapist, not actually punish him. When she tries to seek help from her co-worker, there's nothing that we see come from that. And so the only person she can really rely on to help her is herself. Hopefully I don't need to say this, but it's extremely difficult for rape survivors to talk about their trauma because this is what society conditions us to expect. The people in power don't acknowledge it, they don't do anything to help you, and so you can only protect yourself. It's a bitter truth. And I admire the fact that Mouthwashing not only names Jimmy's rape of Anya as the worst thing he's ever done, but also doesn't give Curly a pass for enabling Jimmy to keep roaming around. Had Curly actually held Jimmy accountable for his actions and done something to limit his movement around the ship, chances are the ship would have never crashed in the first place. Curly had an obligation to protect his crewmates. Instead, he chose to prioritize protecting his friend. An unfortunately very common occurrence in an actual workplace whenever these situations arise. It goes without saying that Anya is dehumanized by Jimmy. We never see her face or name during his final breakdown, he never has a kind word to say about her, and if he actually did humanize her, he wouldn't have assaulted her in the first place. Even the game itself dehumanizes her in a way by never really giving us an opportunity to learn more about her outside of her traumatic event. But she's not the only character that's dehumanized. Curly is too. Perhaps it was because I had familiarity with Curly's first appearance and the last one and then another, but it never occurred to me that the other crewmates didn't come to the same conclusion that I did. Curly is aware of his surroundings and is capable of nonverbal communication. But Curly is rendered voiceless and powerless in a way that is comparable to Anya's own treatment pre-crash. We're never shown a moment post-crash where anybody seems to actually take Curly's own comfort or wishes into account, instead treating him as a burden that needs to be dealt with. Even Anya, in what I may call her worst moment during her time on the Tulpar, seems to condemn Curly to a slow and painful death when she traps herself with him in the medical bay to take her own life. I don't think she should have done that, because I don't know if she asked Curly if he was okay with that. Now, whether nobody actually did attempt to communicate with Curly or if we never saw it because Jimmy didn't, we don't know. But I've seen disabled people discuss how this game illustrates just how dehumanized disabled people are, and how ableism is so normalized that we may not even be aware of it. Stephanie Sterling of the Gymquisition did a great dissection of this, so I recommend you check her video out if you want to hear an actual disabled person's perspective. One of the phrases echoed throughout the game is that our worst moments don't make us monsters. And I've seen several people in the community add some sort of qualifier to this statement. And the one that I think highlights the theme of responsibility and mouthwashing the most is our worst moments don't make us monsters, but not acknowledging them does. Taking responsibility when you've caused harm is not meant to be easy and won't always be particularly rewarding. In order to effectively take responsibility for your actions, you have to listen to the people you've harmed and make a change that will help them heal, not necessarily you. Time and time again, we see Jimmy trying to take responsibility for his actions on the Tulpar, but it often leads to him causing more harm along the way, often via prolonging someone's suffering. And he's unable to acknowledge how he has caused this suffering in the first place. He can't even acknowledge that he's harmed Anya at all. That's what makes him a monster. He doesn't even realize the capacity he has to hurt people. And even at the end, when he thinks he's fixed this and has taken sufficient responsibility, he doesn't. He puts Curly into a cryopod without even asking if that's something that he wants, or knowing if Curly will actually manage to survive long enough to be rescued, or if he'll be condemned to die a slow, painful, lonely death 20 years later. And then he kills himself. He dies thinking he fixed it, and maybe even thinking he's the hero by the end of it. F***ing bastard. If Jimmy were to actually take responsibility for what he's done, he'd find a way to communicate with Curly and figure out what he wants. Frankly, he might just want to be put out of his misery. Who knows? We certainly don't. Then he'd put himself into the cryopod with the intention of confessing that he raped Anya and caused the crash of the Tulpar if he ever got back to Earth. But Curly also fails to take responsibility as the captain by not punishing Jimmy for raping Anya. That's the part that especially gets me. I don't know that killing Jimmy or locking him in the cryopod until they finished their mission would have been responsible. Because if Jimmy was out of commission for whatever reason, that would be 8 months where there would be no backup pilot on the Tulpar if something happened to Curly. If you look at it from a completely utilitarian perspective, yes, we're bringing out the big words now, Curly might have made the best call he could have in regards to what to do to Jimmy. But he still didn't do anything after that to effectively support Anya and make her feel safe. That's his worst moment. And the sad thing is that unlike Jimmy, who had a million chances to attempt to take responsibility and actively didn't, Curly never got that opportunity. And I think that's especially tragic. His ending is not a happy one. It's miserable. In conclusion, I think that I'm going to have to give Mouthwashing, I'll give it a B. The gameplay is easily the worst factor about it, but even then it's not too bad. And I overall really enjoyed the story. I like the setting. It's really just not up my alley personally. There's no real issues with it. The last act could probably be a little bit shorter, but inconsequential. I really liked the game, and yeah, I would recommend that you check it out if you want to. But that's gonna be it for me. I'm gonna go get to work on my 2024 year in review video and whatever I plan on doing next. Thank you for joining me on this really weird video that I filmed in like 2 days. Hope to see you again very soon. Take care, everybody. This is TinyLeaf, signing off.